Therapy dudes, take away your stress, put you in a good mood. If you had them over, they would eat up all your food. It's time for therapy dudes.
Howdy, everybody. This is Dan Fox. I'm one of the therapy dudes. Andre Karkamaz. Sadly, my better half could not be with us this time around. And it happens to be very timely for what we're talking about with these two podcasts, the previous one and this one, which is about school success on the academic and social levels. We are starting the school year right now. I have been a high school principal, school counselor, math teacher, and I am very excited to get into this topic because it's something that I think about a lot. So in the last one, we covered the academic piece. We're going to dig into the social piece now. So there's a lot to be thinking about in terms of our kids' social success when the school year starts. One of the big things to be aware of is the difference between starting off in elementary school for the year versus middle school, high school, or college. One of the challenges of our brain, once we get into that sort of early teen years, early adolescence, is that it has this capacity to conceptualize about how other people are thinking about us, to imagine potential conversations that we might have with other people, to imagine how they're judging us, to compare and compete in very sophisticated ways, and to kind of have that part of our brain sort of automatically in overdrive. Social status is very important for our lizard brain, for our survival, and we tend to overthink these things and to have a bias when we're thinking about them that is sort of worrying about stressful potential outcomes, and this creates a lot of anxiety. So once our kids are in middle school, high school, and college, it's very common for them to be anxious when there's new social situations, unfamiliar social situations, or ones that have some, real stake involved. This is particularly tricky in the first couple of weeks of the year, where the classes aren't familiar yet, where we're sitting, who we're sitting with at lunch hasn't been set up, our routines haven't been in place. And that's a tricky time period, but it also offers a unique opportunity. Because after about 3 weeks, those rhythms will be established. So if we can encourage our kids to lean into the idea of engaging with other students, of initiating conversations, of trying new activities, joining new clubs, getting involved in sports, that can help to set them up for a year of having a more positive, fulfilling social experience. So those first couple of weeks matter. And the details of it matter as well. This may be a conversation to have as a parent, because a lot of times our kids are tired of listening to us. But in the office with my student clients, we break down how to have a kind of ice-breaking conversation that might occur at the beginning of the semester, or anytime they're going into a new group experience. And I talk about the three parts of that conversation: the beginning, the middle, the end. The beginning is a greeting. Hey, good to see you. Or, hey, my name's Dan. What's your name? That's the beginning. It's a willingness to kind of, in a sort of animated, expressive, uplifted way, to greet somebody and let them know through our verbal and nonverbal behavior that we're happy to see them. The second part, the middle, is about just showing interest, being curious about something. This could be asking about anything, how the summer went, what they're thinking about the class, what they're doing later today, how they're feeling overall. But that middle part is about, having a couple of questions that just show that we're wanting to like know more about them and that they matter. The third part of the conversation is the ending. And this is often tricky too, because we sort of start the conversation, we ask a question or two, and then there's just kind of this awkwardness as we're standing there and the other person is standing there, and we don't know exactly how to like wrap things up. But just beginning to wrap things up gives the other person a cue that, hey, this conversation is at its end. We're going to transition to something else. So any kind of like, well, good to see you. Hope I'll see you again soon. Or, all right, I'm going to get started on focusing on the class stuff, but I'm glad you're in this class too. Anything that just kind of lets them know, hey, we're done for now. Have a good one is sufficient. But it's nice to kind of plan out what your greeting, what your typical questions, and what your way of kind of ending and exiting the conversation is that feels good for your personality and temperament. Because in the moment, we're a little overstimulated. And when we're stimulated, our brain is not thinking as well as it normally does. It's not able to kind of have all these tools at its disposal when it does when we're more sort of centered and calm. So we can often kind of freeze up like a deer in the headlights. And these days, that often means that we just sort of pull back, get on our phone if we're allowed to be on our phone in school anymore, but somehow just sort of withdraw from the situation. And if we've practiced these three steps, it's much easier to kind of navigate this stuff in a skillful way. Another thing that I like to talk about with students is that our lizard brain is very quickly assessing the people in the room on a scale that is only got three parts: positive, neutral, or negative. Positive are people that we have good feelings about, whether there's, familiarity or attraction. When we see them, we're kind of like happy about it. That can be a few kids in the class. Negative is a response that we have when, for whatever reason, this person feels a little bit threatening. They may seem intimidating for their look or what we've known about them in the past, the history we might have had with them. Their looks might be intimidating for us, but one way or another, they feel like a bit of a threat. And that feels differently. And then the vast majority of the people don't fall into either of those two categories. Our brain just goes, not a threat, not somebody important for improving our security or status in the tribe. Our lizard brain just kind of ignores them. It doesn't mean that we need to ignore them, but energetically, our nervous system isn't moved in any particular way when we see them. The reason why I think this is useful is because if we take the time to acknowledge and then try to move past those initial feelings, it can often help to just reduce our distress. Often we go into a room, there's a lot of people there. If we're not familiar with this situation, it can be overwhelming. We start to think that everybody else is doing something and they're all talking to people, and I look stupid, and everybody's noticing that, and I don't have anything particularly to do, and we sort of get hyper aware of our own micro behaviors and have this kind of negative self-talk and self-perception. Interestingly, a lot of other people in the room are having that same experience. And if we're able to kind of sort of energetically acknowledge people individually, just to sort of like let our consciousness not stare at them, but let our consciousness just sort of like attune to them for a moment. Often, if we're centered, we can make some predictions or have some awareness from their nonverbal behaviors about how they're feeling, how they're doing, and it kind of takes the energetic um, feelings that we have down a notch. right? They become less intimidating, they become less of a threat, or we can kind of settle down if they're somebody we're sort of like over excited about and just pull ourselves into a more steady, centered place. So to be able to kind of get comfortable in a room by rather than just seeing this mass of people start to like be more conscious of individuals can be a good way to manage our social overwhelm in those situations. There's other things throughout the day that I think are tricky with school, socially. Lunchtime is a good one. It is really tricky to have a good lunchtime routine, and that starts really in the first couple of days of school. Who's in our lunch? Who are we sitting with? Where are we sitting? In a lot of school situations, there isn't enough room in the lunchroom, and if you don't have a spot kind of, I don't know, navigated and negotiated after the first couple of days, people end up like sitting in the hallway or going to the library. So I would encourage your kids and talk with them about, who's in their lunch group, who could they be sitting with, who could they invite into a situation who might not have a good group to hang out with, but is also somebody that's kind of, friendly or that they're somewhat friends with, and they could, include and have be a part of the lunch process. In a smaller way, this is true in the classroom too. Feeling like there's a couple of people that you connect with, and maybe the person that you're sitting next to that you have a good feeling about, that can be really important too. And just being able to be comfortable on a nervous system level, on a social level when we're in class. If we are constantly on guard and overthinking how we imagine people are viewing us, it tends to be distressing and cause us to kind of get into a guarded place. We freeze up a little bit and we're not only uncomfortable, but our brain is going to have a hard time focusing in that class. This is where extracurriculars can be really helpful. Kids who have a sport or are part of a group that has some uh, group challenges that they're doing, whether it's theater, where they're performing, whether it's a musical instrument where they're, in the band or orchestra or marching band and they have performances there. Those kinds of things can be really helpful to feel like you're a member of a team and you're working together in a structured way towards a goal that's greater than yourself, and you can have team success and bonding because of that. Sometimes in like a debate club or other clubs that do competition, robotics, those groups can also really provide a lot of social benefit and a sense of affiliation and connection, which our kids really need at this age. If we don't have those things, our kids tend to be more anxious and depressed. And often that will lead to isolation and an escape from those feelings. And that escape can come in the form of overusing our devices, or in some cases, getting into substances in a way that just kind of is based on needing to avoid the discomfort feelings that we're having in our mind and our body. These escapes are never a solution. They tend to create a bigger problem down the road because we're not actually learning and practicing how to tolerate distressing situations. And we want to try to nip it in the bud if our kiddo is kind of having that aversive feeling, being sort of triggered, anxious, worried, and withdrawing from these social situations. If our kids are in middle school, a lot of times the teachers and the administrators and the school counselors can be involved and be helpful. That gets a little harder in high school and college, but hopefully by the time they've gotten through middle school, they have some strategies in place. This can be an incredibly difficult and challenging time if our kids are kind of on the, outside of most social experiences. We want them to have a fulfilling, meaningful experience in school and to have lots of things that are going on that are beneficial. A lot of times the social scene is just not a good fit. And if that's the case, helping our kiddos to work with the thoughts that they have when they're feeling socially distressed so that they're not highly personalized and negative can be helpful. It's also very useful to have a sense of identity beyond the social world. So if you're a good athlete, if you're good at a particular subject, you can get a lot of sense of self-worth from those experiences independent of a social experience. And that's, I think, what's at stake is this feeling of self-worth if we're not accepted socially by our peers. I think it's great at a young age to be using things like birthdays as an opportunity to reach out to people that are sort of on the fringes of our friend group and try to connect more. And as parents, when our kids are, oh, certainly through middle school, um, at that age, we're able to kind of structure and organize activities and get other kids involved. As they get into high school, it's a little harder to do that. A final thought about this. As a parent, especially when they're in high school and college, we often feel like the academics are not only the priority, but the beginning and end of the conversation. Social stuff doesn't matter. This is a mistake in thinking. There's a critical window of time where kids learn how to relate to other people socially, and that is in adolescence, as their brain has developed the capacity to think more comprehensively about other people, to imagine how people are viewing us. Right? By imagining how people are viewing us, we start to have our self-concept get more sophisticated and be more impacted by other people and our perceived status in the peer group. This stuff is happening at the end of middle school into high school and college because this is the first time that the brain is really encountering these adult ways of thinking about our social world and other people and experiencing how to interact with them. So, one way or another, we are going to learn strategies for how to deal with those situations during these years. If we lean into those situations, if we get practice and support, we will have long-term strategies that are successful socially. If there are distressing experiences, if there are crises socially, and we respond by social withdrawal or by escaping uncomfortable social feelings with overusing our screens or getting involved with addictive substances, we are creating a long-term pattern that could last our whole lives. So this is absolutely not true of academic success, right? If we don't learn executive functioning skills during our high school experience, frankly, it's much better to dial that stuff in your 20s anyway. A lot of people have the experience of not really being able to wrap their mind around certain novels that they have to read in English class or concepts in mathematics while they're in middle school or high school. But by the time they're into college or into their later 20s, the brain is much more able to figure that stuff out. So this is not an academic race, but there is a clock on in terms of how our kids are developing socially, because after 5 or 6 years of having to navigate their adolescent brain and its awareness about social experiences, that stuff's going to get wired in. For better or worse, a lot of times in our adulthood, we're experiencing the social world the way we did as teenagers and having the same sort of feelings and thoughts around social experiences that we did when we were in high school. So if we can help our kids to have healthy experiences and a healthy thought process around their social lives and their self-concept, that can go a long way over the course of their lifetime. Even if this means that we are occasionally sacrificing furthering some, academic goal in the spirit of providing an important social experience and social gain, that's okay. It actually, even though in the outside world, right, grades are mattering more and more, for our inner world and how we relate to social experiences and how that affects our anxiety and our mood, this is a critical window, and we want to keep that at the forefront, especially if things aren't going well. That's got to be dealt with. I think that's all I want to say on this topic right now. Thank you for listening. I hope this was helpful. Like, subscribe, comment, and a shout out to Boulder Psychological Services, who is sponsoring Therapy Dudes. Check out boulderpsychologicalservices.com for all your therapy needs. Have a good one.
Therapy dudes, take away your stress, put you in a good mood. If you had them over, they would eat up all your food. It's time for therapy dudes. Therapy dudes, take away your stress, put you in a good mood. Listen to them anytime you're coming undone.